What if I told you the iconic space carrier from science fiction is getting a real-world counterpart? Not a ship with laser cannons, but something much more strategic. The United States is funding the development of an orbital platform that could function like an aircraft carrier for satellites. This isn't a movie plot, it's a real military concept for an orbital logistics hub designed to dominate the next frontier of conflict. And in this video, we're revealing what it is, how it works, and why it's a bigger deal than any single space weapon. The problem/threat. To understand why America is investing in a project that sounds like it was pulled from a sci-fi script, you first need to understand the threat. The modern world runs on an invisible infrastructure of satellites. Your GPS, bank transactions, global communications, and critical weather forecasts all depend on these assets orbiting silently overhead. For decades, space was a relative sanctuary. But that piece is over. We are now in what experts call the anti-satellite, or ASAT, age. It's an era where nations can no longer be confident that their satellites are safe. The United States' primary strategic competitors, China and Russia, have been aggressively developing sophisticated counter-space capabilities. Since 2007, China has demonstrated its ability to destroy its own satellites with direct-ascent missiles. They are also assessed to be developing ground-based lasers that can disrupt, degrade, or even damage the sensitive sensors on which spy and communication satellites rely. In 2022, a Chinese satellite known as SJ-21 physically docked with a defunct satellite and towed it to a different graveyard orbit, a dual-use technology demonstration that worries analysts. While officially for clearing debris, such a capability could potentially be used to interfere with an adversary satellite. Russia isn't far behind. In November 2021, it tested its Nudal direct-ascent anti-satellite missile, destroying a defunct Soviet satellite. That test created over 1,500 pieces of trackable debris and forced the International Space Station crew to shelter. Russia has also deployed what are believed to be orbital ASAT prototypes and is suspected of developing other anti-satellite systems. This isn't just about single weapons, it's about creating a contested domain where the vital eyes, ears, and voice of the US military could be blinded and silenced in the opening moments of a conflict. Imagine a crisis where America's billion-dollar spy satellites are suddenly taken offline. The response time for a traditional ground launch to replace a satellite is measured in months, sometimes years. In a modern war, that's an eternity. The US Space Force realized it couldn't win a fight if it had to wait for a rocket to be fueled on a launch pad. It needed a way to respond in hours, not months. It needed a launch pad already in space. The secret revealed the solution is a concept known as tactically responsive space, and one of its most ambitious forms is a program to develop what's being called an orbital carrier. This isn't a warship armed with missiles, but something far more strategic, a mobile, in-orbit garage and launch pad for satellites. In early 2025, the US Space Force's innovation arm, SpaceWorks, selected a Seattle-based startup called Gravitics for a contract worth up to $60 million. This contract, part of a program called StratFi, is designed to fast-track the development and demonstration of this revolutionary concept. The goal is to create a platform that can pre-position multiple maneuverable space vehicles in orbit, ready for immediate deployment. Think of it exactly like a naval aircraft carrier. An aircraft carrier doesn't build the planes, it carries them to where they're needed, ready to launch at a moment's notice. The orbital carrier concept does the same thing for satellites. It would be launched into orbit once, filled with a variety of smaller, agile spacecraft. Then, it would wait. If an adversary damages or destroys a critical US satellite, the Space Force wouldn't have to scramble to schedule a launch from Earth. They could simply send a command to the orbital platform, which could then deploy a replacement satellite on demand, turning a months-long crisis into a problem solved in hours. As Gravitics CEO Colin Dugan stated, the orbital carrier is a game-changer, acting as a pre-positioned launch pad in space. How it works. So what might this space platform actually look like? Based on some illustrations and concepts, one can imagine a large, modular structure, maybe the size of a shipping container, wrapped in solar panels to power its internal systems. Inside, it could feature a large bay to house its cargo. Some concepts show this bay as unpressurized, which would be a critical design choice. Because it wouldn't need to support human life with air and stable temperatures, it could be lighter, less complex, and dedicated entirely to its primary mission, protecting and deploying satellites. The platform would act as a protective shell, shielding its delicate cargo from the brutal environment of space, extreme temperature swings, radiation, and micrometeoroids. When the call comes, a deployment mechanism would release a satellite. That satellite would then use its own propulsion to travel to its designated orbit. The strategic advantage here is speed. The Space Force has been aggressively pursuing what it calls Tactically Responsive Space, or TAC-RS. Through missions like Victus Nox and Victus Haze, they have already shattered records for ground launch. For Victus Nox, they went from receiving launch orders to a successful launch in just 27 hours. But an orbital platform bypasses the ground entirely. Some theoretical estimates suggest it could deploy a new satellite to some locations in low Earth orbit in under 2 hours, though this is an optimistic goal. This creates a new paradigm of resilience. For instance, imagine a hypothetical scenario. If an enemy attempts to dazzle or blind an American spy satellite with a laser, the orbital platform could potentially deploy a small defensive satellite to block the attacker's line of sight. Or, if a key component of a GPS or communications constellation is damaged, a replacement is already waiting hundreds of miles up, ready to be slotted in. The platform itself, once its initial payload is deployed, could in the future be revisited and restocked by other logistics missions, making it a reusable and persistent piece of infrastructure in space. This is all part of a long-term vision for a true in-space logistics network, one that breaks the tyranny of Earth-bound launch schedules. We're about to explore why this logistics platform is more significant than any single space weapon. But first, if you're finding this deep dive into military technology fascinating, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. We unpack the most important developments in science and defense every week, and you won't want to miss what we have coming up next. The game-changing implications. It's easy to hear orbital carrier and imagine epic space battles. But its real significance is far more subtle. Why is it a bigger deal than any single space weapon? Because it fundamentally changes the strategic calculus of space warfare. It's not about winning a fight, it's about making a fight unwinnable for the adversary. This concept is called deterrence through resilience. Right now, an adversary might believe that a swift, preemptive strike against a small number of high-value US satellites could cripple America's ability to respond to a crisis. But if the US can replace those satellites almost instantly, what's the point of the attack? An orbital logistics hub negates the effectiveness of a first strike. It communicates to potential adversaries that any damage they inflict will be temporary, and the capability they sought to eliminate will be back online before they can press their advantage. Furthermore, the concept transforms space operations from being reactive to proactive. Instead of waiting for a satellite to fail and then reacting, the Space Force could have replacements, and even entirely new capabilities, pre-positioned for emerging threats. This provides unprecedented flexibility. Imagine needing sudden, persistent satellite coverage over a new global hotspot. Instead of waiting weeks or months for a launch, a satellite from an orbital platform could be moved into position within a day. This also has massive commercial implications. A company like Gravitics isn't just building military concepts, they are developing core technologies for a future commercial space economy. Gravitics has announced partnerships with commercial space station companies to use similar module technology. The same platform that deploys a military satellite could one day deploy a fleet of commercial internet satellites, repair a malfunctioning weather satellite, or serve as a logistics hub for commercial space stations. This military investment is helping jumpstart an entire ecosystem of in-orbit servicing, assembly, and manufacturing. The future of space logistics. The initial plan is for Gravitics to fly a Pathfinder demonstration mission to validate the core systems of their orbital platform concepts. But the long-term vision is far grander. This isn't just about one platform, it's about building a new space architecture. The program paves the way for a future where a network of orbital logistics hubs could be strategically placed in different orbits, providing global, on-demand access to space. We could see a modular future where these platforms are refueled, upgraded, and restocked entirely in space, much like a naval fleet at sea. This could lead to a permanent logistics infrastructure, a series of orbital outposts that finally allow us to build, repair, and deploy complex systems without the immense cost and delay of launching everything from Earth. This represents one of the most significant shifts in space strategy in a generation. It's a move away from simply having assets in space to having true, dynamic control of space. The ability to maneuver, replenish, and augment space capabilities on the fly is a key part of what the military calls space superiority. So, is the USA building a warship that never lands? Not in the way you see in the movies. It's not a ship of guns, but a ship of options. The Orbital Carrier concept is for a logistics-focused mothership, designed to ensure that America's vital space infrastructure can withstand an attack and keep functioning. It's a safety net for our digital world and a powerful deterrent designed to prevent a war in space before it ever begins. We are witnessing the transition from a static, vulnerable space presence to a dynamic and resilient one. This could be the real-life beginning of a permanent human infrastructure in orbit, built not for conquest, but for persistence. What do you think? Is this kind of on-orbit logistics platform the key to preventing a war in space, or is it an escalatory step? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, for more deep dives into the technology that will define our future, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. Thanks for watching.